When it comes to holiday gift giving, I want to give things people really love. Beautiful, timeless pieces they'll wear for years. That's why I'm going with Quince. From Mongolian cashmere sweaters to Italian wool coats, Quince offers premium quality at a price that works for my holiday gift-giving budget. The only problem I'm having is deciding between Quince's beautiful home goods, jewelry, accessories, bags, and clothing. There are so many options, you'll definitely find something for everyone on your list. Oh, and I should mention their adorable kids and baby clothes and their holiday PJs, which will look great in your holiday photos. Every piece is made with premium materials from ethical, trusted factories and priced far below what other luxury brands charge. Find gifts so good you'll want to keep them with Quince. Go to quince.com/POTC for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada, too. That's QUINCE.com/POTC to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/POTC.
When you're going through something difficult, reflect on the question of how can I use this experience to do something creative?
It's important to be expansive about creativity. I think a lot of people get almost paralyzed, like, oh, I need to paint this beautiful portrait to be a creator or an artist. That's very limiting.
There's magic in changing just one life in the audience. And sometimes maybe that life that we're changing with our creative work is even our own.
You don't need to go into it with an outcome. You just need to start. And sometimes we just need a little bit of spaciousness in our life to tap into that.
We talk a lot about process versus outcome and how important it is to focus on the why, because we don't always control that outcome, and it can still be worth doing even if it doesn't turn out the way that you're hoping that it will.
That was us, your Psychologists Off the Clock co-hosts.
We are 5 experts in psychology here to bring you cutting-edge and science-based ideas to help you flourish in your relationships, work, and health.
I'm Dr. Debbie Sorensen, a clinical psychologist practicing in Mile High, Denver, Colorado, author of Act for Burnout and Mac Daily Journal.
From America's Heartland, I'm Dr. Emily Edlin, a clinical psychologist based in Chicago, Illinois, and author of Autonomy Supportive Parenting.
Calling in from Vienna, Austria, I'm Michael Herold, ACT coach, confidence trainer, and the author of an upcoming book on developing your confidence and social skills.
From Boston, I'm Dr. Yael Schoenbrunn, faculty at Brown University and author of Work, Parent, Thrive and an upcoming book about misunderstanding.
And from coastal New England, I'm Dr. Jill Stoddard, author of Be Mighty, The Big Book of ACT Metaphors, and Imposter No More.
We hope you take what you learn here to build a rich and meaningful life.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock.
Hey listeners, just a super quick reminder that you can listen to the podcast ad-free by supporting us on Patreon for just $5 a month. Or you can support the podcast with a one-time donation on Buy Me a Coffee. Thank you to everyone who's already supporting us.
Hey, everybody. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. We have the whole team here today, and we love doing these co-host episodes to round out the year and get ready for a fresh new year. And in 2026, we will be going into our 10th year of podcasting. And, we think of New Year's as a time of year when the holiday season is slowing down. We're starting to get out of the hustle and bustle. And it's a time of year where we maybe reflect on the year behind us and think ahead to what we want our next year to be about. So we're bringing you this co-host episode today to offer some ideas and inspiration for your 2026.
So the center theme of this episode is creativity. And you might wonder, why creativity? This isn't an art podcast, it's a psychology podcast. But creativity has a whole lot of psychological benefits. Being creative is straight up enjoyable. It's a way to connect with people. It's also a way to make meaning from suffering. And so in this episode today, we're going to talk about some tips for how to be creative, but we're also going to talk about the why. Like, what's the meaning behind being creative and what are the benefits from it?
So today we have really 2 big parts of the episode that we're going to share with you. In the first part, we're going to be talking about this idea of finding meaning in the New Year's and using it as an opportunity to reflect. And we're going to start with some exercises to help you reflect on the past year. to just have a little bit of depth to your understanding of what you've been through and make meaning out of this big transition of the New Year's. And so we have some thoughts on that and a few exercises to share.
And then in the second part of the episode, we'll give you some ideas for creativity in the year to come. If you're struggling or just want to create more meaning through creativity in the new year, we'll offer you some ideas and inspiration.
We might associate New Year's with resolutions, goals, plans to change things and improve ourselves, but we can also use it as an opportunity to dig a little deeper. The end of the year, I know for me, is a time for great reflection on my life. There's an essay that Debbie found from 1821 called New Year's Eve by English essayist Charles Lamb. And here's a quote that I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. No one ever regarded the 1st of January with indifference. It is that from which all date their time and count upon what is left. Of all sound of all bells, most solemn and touching is the peal which rings out the old year. I never hear it without a gathering up of my mind to a concentration of all the images that have been diffused over the past 12 months. All I have done or suffered, performed or neglected in that regretted time. I begin to know its worth as when a person dies. So this isn't new. This was written over 200 years ago, but we think it highlights the common humanity aspect of this desire to reflect on the passage of another year gone by.
And so we think there's an opportunity here to make meaning out of your past year and to go into 2026 from a grounded and values-oriented place of depth and wisdom. So I'm going to give you an exercise today, but to start out with a quick story of why I came up with this exercise. You may recall I did an interview with Maureen Murdoch back in 2024. It was episode 345, which was about writing for personal growth, and she teaches memoir writing. And after I did that episode with Maureen, I went to a writing workshop that she gave in Santa Fe later that year. And then that led me into an online writing workshop that she co-teaches with a writing teacher, Jennifer Seelig. And I've been taking that class all year. And I've been finding it really meaningful to look back on my past and for writing to be really helpful for this. So I'm going to read a quote that Maureen shared in her book, which we also quoted in the episode itself. She said, "We all need to tell our story and to understand our story. We all need to understand our passage from birth to life and then to death. We need for our life to signify, to touch the eternal, to understand the mysterious, and to find out who we are." And so for our New Year's episode for today, I actually am thinking of it as a mini memoir that you can write of the past year. So we're going to zoom out and just reflect back on this past year of our lives. And so I'm going to give you some instructions. You can either write your responses down, so like pause this for a minute and just get out your journal or a computer doc, however you like to write. Or if you're driving or on a walk, you can just pause it and kind of think about this. Like you don't have to do it as a writing exercise if you don't want to. You can take as long or as short as you want. You know, you can do this in 30 seconds or you can really take your time with it. But the idea is to help you reflect back on the past year of what you've been through and, you know, write a little mini memoir of your past year and see what emerges for you.
And we'll put these prompts into our show notes too. So for anyone who wants to return to these, that's a quick way that you can reference them.
I also like this as an exercise to do with friends or family, right, at your New Year's parties. But it's kind of a nice bonding exercise to get to know one another more and to make meaning as a shared community activity.
That's such a great idea, Yael. It just made me think of our episode with Scott Shigeoka about curiosity and trying to have deeper conversations. And I think this kind of exercise would be a great way to do that. It's great. Great idea.
Yeah, so just have some fun with this. There are no set rules. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And the important thing is that you're having some fun with it and you're allowing yourself to be creative with it.
So the first part is to reflect on the ups and downs of the past year. So think back to New Year's 1 year ago at the start of 2025. Where were you and what were you doing? Picture yourself back there and describe what you were doing. Think about the ups and downs of the year since. What were some of the highlights? What were some of the most difficult moments for you? If it helps, you can use bullet points or even draw a timeline or other depiction of your year. So just zoom out to think about the ups and downs you've been through in a year's time.
And I want to jump in with a quick suggestion, because if any of you guys have a terrible memory like I do, I hear something like that and I go kind of blank. I'm like, I have no idea what I was doing. So I think sometimes it can help to anchor in holidays, like if your birthday was in January, or what were you doing around Valentine's Day, or what were you doing around Easter, or those kinds of things might help orient and then cue your memory to be able to come up with and remember some of those ups and downs, or maybe thinking about the people with whom you've spent time over the year. And that may help with some of those ups and downs.
What I did for this exercise is I actually, after a first attempt to come up with this stuff, like Jill said, and then I failed miserably at thinking of things, I pulled up my calendar and I scrolled like month by month through them. And for each month, I noted 2 or 3 things that stood out in that month. It was actually quite surprising how a busy year can look when you're actually putting it under the microscope.
That's a great idea.
Okay, part 2 is meaningful moments. So thinking back to this past year you've been through, think of 2 or 3 meaningful moments. These could be really big peak experiences like a trip or a big exciting life event, or it could just be an ordinary moment that was meaningful to you in some way. Whatever you choose, write about each of these moments with as much sensory detail as you can. So call these moments back to mind and describe them in detail. Where were you? Who was there with you, or were you alone? What did you see, hear, and feel? Just bring the memories alive of these meaningful moments.
I just want to say that I love the part where it could be a peak experience, but also ordinary moments can be very meaningful too.
That reminds me of the episode that I did with Ron Siegel about the extraordinary gift of being ordinary, because peak experiences are great. But like when I think about my fondest memories, they're always the most ordinary things, being with family or friends in these just kind of mundane ways where I just feel connected and content.
Yeah, you know what popped in my head was driving down the freeway in the autumn when the leaves were at peak foliage, and I just started to cry. I was like so overwhelmed by this experience of awe. And as soon as you said meaningful moments, that's what popped to my head. And it kind of surprised me because it's so mundane, but it really felt meaningful. And I think for me, part of why it was meaningful is because it had to do with my move from California to Massachusetts and all of what that means for me and my family.
And part of the reason we're doing this exercise is because we don't want to lose those moments in the passage of time. And so there's something about pausing to appreciate them that we can take that with us. All right, so part 3 is to reflect on what you learned over the past year. What mistakes or regrets do you have from the past year? What are you proud of? What have you learned about yourself this year? And what lessons do you want to take with you as you move into 2026 and beyond? What you've been through and how you've changed over the year, but it's also really a values question. You know, I think we can often learn from our regrets and mistakes and also from what we're proud of. It can teach us something about what's important to us. We sometimes learn through experience. And so looking back at the experience you've had over the past year and see if there's any wisdom in there.
I find that the end of the year, the New Year's resolutions kind of thing, is also something that seems to invite us to be proud of ourselves briefly. Most of the time, we're good at berating ourselves and seeing our shortcomings throughout the year. And you have to kind of push people a little bit to go on the bragging stage and talk about all the awesome things that they have done. And at the end of the year, that seems to, for one like magical night of the year, it seems to come a little bit easier to people. And that's why I'm really happy and, dare I say, proud that we have people journal a little bit about those proud moments of the year and their achievements.
I'll just say quickly, too, I tend to really resist the concept of New Year's resolutions. And part of that is because I think there's a lot of focus on what's wrong with me and what do I need to be better in a very surface way. And I think these kinds of questions allow us to dig deeper and include what we really love and appreciate about who we are, which then can kind of counter that impulse, that societal push to be quote unquote better in very material ways.
Okay. And then the fourth part, which is the final part, is to think about where to go from here. What are you longing for in the new year and beyond? What's calling to your soul? What areas have you been neglecting that need attention? And what values would you like to focus on in the year ahead?
And I bet for a lot of things people come up with, we probably have an episode for all of it, because one of the things that popped into my head was Leidy Klotz's Subtract and Greg McKeown, Essentialism. You know, a lot of these episodes we've done are about identifying what's really important to you. We had Nedra Tawwab on boundaries, you know, like learning how to say no, asking for help, focusing on what's important, subtracting the things that aren't important.
I'm going to share that I'm actually very proud of myself for what I did January 2025, which was I got sick in 2024 on each of my week-long vacations. And I did not ignore that. I knew that was telling me something, that as soon as I relaxed and let down, I got sick. So this year, I made a concerted effort that every morning, instead of jumping in and rushing in to my emails and my day, I have coffee and I have these pumpkin breakfast cookies that I make and New York Times word puzzles. And I start my day in a very slow, relaxing, calm way. And knock on wood, I haven't been sick since last Christmas break.
That's
It
amazing.
was a celebration.
I kind of want to hear more about those pumpkin, what did you call them?
Pumpkin breakfast cookies. They're my
Pumpkin
favorite.
breakfast
Yeah,
cookies.
they're
Tell me more. Like put the
vegan
recipe
and-
in the show notes.
Vegan and gluten-free.
All you have to do is call a cookie a breakfast cookie, and then boom, you can eat cookies for breakfast.
Yeah.
There are chocolate chips in there.
I love this idea, Emily, because I think as we think about what we're longing for in the new year, again, there's that tendency towards self-improvement, but what about enjoying your life? And what about taking times for the things that give you a sense of vitality and enjoyment and just carving out some space for that? So I hope that this exercise can help point you toward whatever that is calling to you at that deeper level. And so again, we're going to link to a worksheet with these questions that you can download and use them to reflect either by yourself in your journal or with your friends or however you'd like to. And I'm also going to link to some other online tools that I've found that other people wrote, a life compass, a word of the year exercise. We'll put all that in our show notes. So if you want to just take this time to reflect, you'll have plenty of resources to choose from.
I love learning. It's one of my favorite activities. And if you'd asked me what I would bring to a desert island, I would say, well, masterclass. Right now, I'm geeking out with the other co-hosts about their classes on writing. My personal favorite is Dan Brown's class on writing a thriller. I've read all his books. With Masterclass, you get thousands of bite-sized lessons across 13 categories that can fit into even the busiest of schedules. You can do what I do and turn your commute or workout into a classroom. With audio mode, you can listen to masterclass lessons anytime, anywhere, just like you do with this podcast. And if you're headed on a trip, you can download classes to watch offline and make the most of your travel time. It even works if you're headed to a desert island. Masterclass always has great offers during the holidays, sometimes up to as much as 50% off. Head over to masterclass.com/POTC for the current offer. That's up to 50% off at masterclass.com/POTC. masterclass.com/POTC.
All right. So we've been thinking about past year reflections, and now we're going to think a little bit more concretely about the year ahead. And what we want to invite people to do is, instead of just the usual of thinking about exercise, eating healthier food, and so on, thinking more about including some life-affirming activities, including creativity, which we mentioned in the beginning of the episode, not only because that is something that all of us are really interested in because of the copious amounts of evidence for how good creativity is for our psychological well-being, not just in the positive sense of being creative feels really good, but also because it can help us navigate some of life's most difficult challenges. And this is something that we co-hosts have talked about, shows up in our podcasting, that when one of us is going through something difficult, you might find episodes showing up on that topic. And I'll just share, when my father passed away, I did a number of episodes on grief. And these are ways that we can make meaning from our suffering and use our creativity both to create some sense and coherence from what's happened, but also to help others. And that's a part of what creativity can offer us too, is not just to make meaning for ourselves, but to sort of make a contribution out of it.
So that is what, if I'm not mistaken, Viktor Frankl termed tragic optimism, where he talks about the fact that, I'm going to only get this like loosely correct, where he talks about like suffering being a part of life no matter what, and that the optimistic part in that is to say, well, if there's suffering, then I'm going to make meaning out of this. And the way that I translate that for me is that whenever there's a difficult situation that kind of like as the shit hitteth the fan, as Shakespeare would have written, then I can say, you know what, I have to make it through that, but someone else is going to benefit from me having gone through that, because I will be able to add aid to their struggle. I can be the one who says, hey, take my hand, I've been there, we'll go through that together. And that is tragic optimism.
Yeah. You're also making me think about post-traumatic growth, that, we know when people experience trauma, a small percentage go on to develop PTSD, another percentage sort of return to their pre-trauma functioning. And then this other big swath of people, I don't know the statistics, but, experience post-traumatic growth where they actually rebound and are better off post-trauma because of the meaning making, essentially, and the learning that takes place. And I think for all of us, we have done, whether it's tragic optimism or post-traumatic growth, but have used creative endeavors for exactly those purposes. And so we thought maybe we would share a little bit about what creating and creativity have meant to each of us, whether it's helping other people, whether it's just having a good time, or whether it's trying to turn pain into purpose or meaning.
So when we were prepping this episode, my first reaction to this topic was, but I haven't really created meaning from suffering in my creative work. And then as we were just now talking, I realized that my whole mission in my parenting work came out of my suffering as a new mother. And I hate using that term because it was also such an incredible and transformative, life-changing, I would never do it differently. I absolutely love my role as mother and my children, but there was a lot of suffering as a new mother, and I became really passionate about doing my part as a science-based psychologist to reduce parental suffering in any way I could with my voice and with my writing. So it really has transformed from a blog on a website to a book to a Substack and speaking and doing parent coaching now. So I think now that we're talking about it in this context, I realize that I really developed kind of a life mission or a calling to be.
And podcasting and your new YouTube channel. I mean, those are all examples of putting out creative
in
works,
different
right?
ways of being creative.
Yeah.
To support, uplift, empower, and change lives for the better.
And I'm glad you mentioned this
cool.
because I think people think of creativity as taking a pottery class or painting or doing music or something, but actually you are creating something, and it's in the professional realm, but creating a blog post, creating a new thing, creating something new in your profession. Also, you're making something from scratch. There's a lot of creativity to that.
So I have always struggled with creativity. So I'm going to take a little bit of a detour around the answer. I find that working with my head most of the time, thinking of stuff, coming up with ideas and so on. When I am unwinding and recharging, I need to do things with my hands. And they need to be as, dare I say, uncreative as possible. I want to say, maybe this is sacrilegious, and maybe we get a lot of hate mail. But for me, building Lego is not creative. It is turn on some music, bring the stuff out, have some snacks ready, and start building for hours, or painting miniature figurines, or building remote control cars. It is follow a manual step by step. And then suddenly at 3 a.m, it's like, oh no, I need to go get some sleep. And so this is not, for me, creativity as much as it is creating. It is creating, and it allows me to turn off that part in my brain that needs to bring something into the world and pass that task over to my hands to then bring something into the world. And it allows me to recharge my batteries and to just forget about anything that's going on, because I have a Lego set in front of me and there's nothing more important than this.
I mean, I think it's important to be expansive about the definition of creativity. I think a lot of people get almost paralyzed, like, oh, I need to paint this beautiful portrait to be a creator or an artist. That's very limiting. And so I hope, if anything, from this conversation, listeners can walk away thinking, oh, I do have all these acts of creativity. They just kind of fell outside how I thought about creativity. And I think we've kind of touched on a lot of the benefits and purposes. And one thing I have realized as a parent, as a wife, as a person, is how regulating it is. And when people have the time and space for their creativity, my husband's a psychologist, but he is a really talented artist who draws every night on the couch and takes a class once a week. And for him, it's like his lifeline to staying balanced. And I think it's important to really value that as much as earning an income, and that there's that sort of regulation to creativity if we tune in and see that and feel that.
Do we know emotion regulation?
Like nervous system regulation, feeling balanced and calm and centered.
I was going to say, actually, that I think that creativity, so broadly defined, actually can go in both directions. I was just thinking about this weekend because I've been pretty overwhelmed by writing this new book that is out next year, about a year from now. And it actually really activates my nervous system in like an anxiety direction. And this weekend, I was recognizing that I have been really stressed out. And so what I did was I took myself to the art store and bought a bunch of yarn to work on a crocheting project, which for me is very calming and soothing. Similar to what Michael's saying, it's not recreating the wheel. I'm really just doing the same pattern over and over and over again. And I wouldn't even call it meditative because I'm not focusing, but there's something quite calming about creating something in that way. But it really does something quite different for my nervous system than writing, which is also a creative endeavor, which is much more activating and cognitively taxing. And I enjoy both, but they really operate in very different directions in terms of the activation that they result in.
Well, and I think you touch on an important piece that's been on my mind, which is types of writing and the purpose of the writing. And one of my goals this year that I'm still working on is more personal writing that no one ever sees, and really trying to have a more creative, for lack of a better word, but not academic, not professional, not for instruction or support of others, but really my own stories, my own experiences written down just for me in a creative way. And that serves a different function for my system, each type of writing.
Well, Emily, this is the perfect segue for me to share my current creative process, which really is about writing. And I think after I finished my burnout book, I was pretty burnt out on writing for a deadline and professional writing, and reconnecting with creative writing, which is something I've always loved, but haven't made time for recently, has been both meaningful in the sense of it's just helping me process some things and transform my own suffering through this difficult year in the world and in my life personally. But it's also been fun and life affirming, and it's just a nice practice. And I usually get up in the morning and make myself coffee and write for a little bit, not every day, but I try to. And I really do feel better and more grounded when I start the day that way. And I will quickly just share that if any of our listeners want to do a writing practice, like a morning writing practice or something like that in the year ahead, I will share some resources also on our show notes. I have a Substack where I share some writing prompts, and I have a 30-day journaling challenge that you can try, and just some other resources like some writing inspiration and quotes that I like. So I'll link to that. And if you want to write more in the new year, if you think that would be a good creative thing for you to check that out, and it might give you some ideas and inspiration.
Yeah, I feel really similarly. What you just made me think of, Debbie, is I've started writing fiction, which I have never done before. And what I think I really love about it makes me feel so jazzed. I do have a little anxiety and, the whole imposter thing of like, who do I think I am trying to write fiction? I'm not a fiction writer. And I do it anyway. And I love it when I do it. And I think what I love about it is that it's an escape from reality. So that when life feels really hard and painful, I can go into this world with these people that I'm creating, and they can be and say whatever I want them to be and say. But on the flip side of that, the other big thing I'm doing creatively is truly the opposite of an escape from pain. But it is something, I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. I mean, just thinking about it makes me cry. And it's something that feels so meaningful and purposeful. So I've talked a little bit on the podcast, I think, about how I have a brother who is incarcerated, and it has just been so incredibly difficult for my family. And I actually went on a giant true crime podcast called Betrayal Weekly, which we can also link to in the show notes. And I told my story, and I heard from several listeners saying that it made them feel less alone, thanking me for sharing my story. One woman disclosed her abuse to me. She'd never told a soul. And she told me, and I have not been able to say this out loud without crying every time. She said, "You made me realize that I didn't do anything wrong. He did." And that just, like power of sharing a story, even when it's hard and painful. But, my family doesn't want me talking about this stuff. And I feel compelled to share it. And I want to create something that allows other people to share their stories. And so I'm in the midst of developing a new podcast. Working title right now is We the Sunlight, because it's all about how sunlight is the best disinfectant and we shouldn't have to shine it alone. And it's a place for survivors of trauma or crime, whistleblowers, anyone who's been intimately connected to someone who has done harm, to tell their stories. So my first guest was Jules Bindi, who is was Harvey Weinstein's massage therapist. In a couple weeks, I'll be interviewing Brandon Wolf, who was a survivor of the Pulse nightclub shooting, and he's now an anti-gun and pro-LGBTQ activist. And so it's hard, like it's intense and it's painful, but it feels like a way that I'm creating something good and helpful and meaningful from the darkest period of my family's experiences. And part of the reason I want to talk about it here too is that if anyone listening has a story that falls into that sphere and you want to talk to me, you can schedule like a 30-minute free consult on my website, jillstoddard.com. I can link to that in the show notes. And we can talk about, what it would entail and whether you want to come on. So if you or someone might be interested, hit me up.
Such a powerful example of the intersection of personal meaning and work in service of others.
Yeah. And what a great listen. One of the most powerful podcast episodes that I've listened to. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, and I think, Betrayal, like I want to give a shout out to them, like what they're doing is also a form of creating and creativity. And my interview was 3 hours and they condensed it to a 35-minute story, and they just did a brilliant job. And the work that takes behind the scenes to get the music right and the story right and the elements right. I mean, that's creating, that's creativity. And I'm so grateful. They just did justice to the story, and it's making me cry again. But I'm proud of it. And I, when I got those emails, even though my family doesn't want me talking about it, like I really knew that I did the right thing. And I'm so glad that they're using their creativity to put something out in the world that I know is helping other people. And it helps me.
I loved the conversation as well. And I think one thing it points to that might be helpful for our listeners is how sometimes you start out small and you don't really know where it's going to lead you. So you might start writing something or creating something or putting something out in the world, and you kind of just need to be open to see. You don't need to go into it with an outcome. You just need to start. And sometimes we just need a little bit of spaciousness in our life to tap into that and an openness to see what happens. And it might be that we're just doing it for ourselves, and that's okay. That's really important. And sometimes it can lead us to unexpected places.
Yeah, that's a great point, Debbie.
So Jill, now of course I'm super curious to hear when your new podcast is coming out and where I can catch up on that.
That's a great question. I have absolutely no idea. Well, my plan is to try to get a full season done. So different from POTC. I don't know if listeners know, but we do an interview and then generally tend to release the episode about a month or so later. In this case, because it's just me and it is very, very time consuming, it probably took me 10 to 15 hours to do one episode. So my plan is to get a whole season done and then release. So I'm thinking like a year from now, but you can be sure whenever the time comes, I will be here on POTC announcing it and hoping that all our amazing, wonderful, loyal listeners will come join me and get on board with the new endeavor. But like Debbie's saying, if for some reason that never happens, it still feels worthwhile to me. I'm still getting so much out of what I'm doing. And we talk a lot on the podcast about process versus outcome and how important it is to focus on the why, the actions, the steps, because we don't always control that outcome and it can still be worth doing even if it doesn't turn out the way that you're hoping that it will.
I think that in this day and age that we're living in, there's an overemphasis on scale. Like if we do something, 500 million people need to see it and read it. And there's magic in changing maybe just one life in the audience, but change it. And sometimes maybe that life that we're changing with our creative work is even our own. Like I've learned that when I'm preparing talks, I can hope that I can like sway the entire audience and all of that stuff, or I can hope that there's one person in the audience that will think differently after that talk, and then I write the talk and it's from me because I'm thinking, hey, I need to hear that as well. So let the one person that is swayed from that talk be me.
And that's creativity in creating too, right? Like even writing a talk, sometimes I think it feels like, oh, I'm doing this professional thing on a stage or in a webinar. But when you have to think about the story you're going to tell and how you're going to tell it and the message that you want, I think that's a version of creativity and creating that can be fulfilling, like you said, for you, the creator, and for the people for whom you're creating it.
Well, I love that part of creativity because it's like creating while simultaneously meeting other people where they're at. So doing talks where you sort of create in the moment based on what you're responding to in the audience. You're kind of creating together this experience.
So I wonder if we can end with some practical suggestions to help listeners who want to have more creativity in their lives in the new year. If we could each offer a tip, a practical suggestion for something to do that might be helpful. Jill, you want to start us off?
Yes, I want to tell everyone to immediately go to creativemornings.com and see if there is a Creative Mornings chapter near you. It is a group of creatives who get together once a month. It is in, I want to say 70 countries and 272 cities, something like that. It's once a month. Every month there's a theme and every chapter is doing the same theme. So you really feel this sense of worldwide community among creatives. And it is, we've been talking about how creativity expresses itself in so many ways. And so there are graphic designers and singers and music. And when you go to the meeting, in my meeting anyway, it usually starts with a musical performance and then there's a talk that's based on the theme. And I look forward to it every single month. It just fills my cup and fills my soul. And just to be in person with a bunch of other people who care about creativity, I just cannot recommend it enough. So check it out. And Debbie, I know there's one in Denver.
I'll check it out.
There's one in Vienna as well. I spoke there, I think 2016 or 17, I spoke about fear of rejection and embarrassment. It was an event where afterwards someone approached me and we started talking about relational frame theory. First time in my life that someone walked up to me, I was immediately in love. Like that was a magical moment. Yeah,
The way to
highly
Michael's
recommended.
heart is through relational frame theory.
Nerd
Yeah.
alert.
Among other things. Yeah, brilliant event series. I personally hope it would be creative evenings and not mornings. I'm not a morning person.
Oh, and by the way, I should say it's free. It's
Yeah.
totally free. And they get sponsors. And so
There's
there's coffee
breakfast.
and treats and everything is free. That's very important. I should have mentioned that.
Yeah.
So great.
Very well worth supporting for sure. Absolutely.
I'll chime in with a more general tip, which is when you're going through something difficult to just reflect with yourself on the question of how can I use this experience to do something creative, or how can a creative activity help me to make meaning or heal from this experience? And I will say that is something that I regularly do as somebody who feels things very deeply. It's a way that I manage my own response to difficult situations in turning it into something that has some kind of a creative output. And like we talked about before, sometimes it's about creating something that is going to calm my nervous system. And sometimes it really is about making meaning through writing or some other creative outlet that feels either like it makes sense of the experience or contributes in some way to other people, which helps me to feel a greater sense of peace around something that's difficult.
I will give my tip now, which is if you're a busy person and you really want to have more creativity in your life, you need to prioritize it. So that might mean that you don't keep up with your laundry, or you say no to something at work that you could be doing, that you actually carve it out for yourself. Because I think often I feel like I'm too busy. I don't have time for this, whether it's, a pottery class or painting or writing or whatever. And you have to think of it as important, and you have to actually manage your time so that you can carve out some time and space for it. And that might mean that other things have to be a little bit less important, and you have to shift things around a little bit. So, the laundry piles up, but you're taking your pottery class. And I think treating it as an actually important thing, to me, that's key.
So for me, it's a combination of that intentionality and prioritizing with flexibility and managing expectations. So speaking to many high achievers, perfectionists who might think, if I don't write 10 minutes a day, I just shouldn't do it, right? Being flexible with yourself of you're intentional, you prioritize it, and you're flexible when it just can't work out. And it doesn't mean you just can't do it anymore. You do what you can when you can, and appreciate what you get when you do it. And then I think that helps it become more self-reinforcing instead of, it can start to feel like a chore if you feel like there's this rigidity to it. So that's my advice, speaking from personal experience.
I'm going to come in low key at the end as someone who's been struggling with insomnia for many, many years. I found this super new technology that has helped me this year immensely, given me immense joy and increased my sleep. This new technology is called printed books. And you lie in bed and you turn on a light, and you don't have a phone, you don't have headphones, you don't have an iPad, you just have this printed book and you read it. And it's amazing.
Like
and
with paper?
Yeah. It's we can put it in the show notes, printed book. And
very cutting edge, Michael.
It is cutting edge. I'm reading Dan Brown's book now, and it's fantastic. And I'm reading and I'm turning the pages, and then my eyes get tired and I turn the lights off and I sleep. It's amazing. So just anyone who doesn't know what books are, they're amazing.
Okay, but that brings up a really good point that I wanted to include, which is connecting with other creativity is helpful for your own creativity. So making time for reading books. I think watching really good TV and movies is part of being in touch with creativity. There's so much amazing storytelling and character development. So I think there's that too, of prioritizing that connection with others' creativity.
Appreciating others' creativity. Like Yael either knitted or crocheted me a scarf a few years ago. And whenever I wear it, it just makes me think of her and feel filled with love. So I appreciate her creative output, and it's like a win-win.
It's a connection.
It was probably supposed to be a pair of socks, and it turned out to be a scarf.
How dare you? It is definitely a scarf.
Well, in music, we didn't even talk about music much, but like, walking around and listening to your favorite tunes. And yeah, there's so many ways to tap into that.
Yeah, that can be
Love
a
it.
good offset to all the words and language from podcasts and audiobooks to go to music, and it just kind of triggers another part of the brain, which can feel really good.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Here's to 2026. Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. You can now listen to our podcast ad-free by becoming a supporter on Patreon. You can link to Patreon on our website or go to patreon.com/offtheclocksite.
If you enjoy our podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review and sharing this episode with a friend or an enemy who would enjoy it.
You can get more psychology tips by subscribing to our fabulous newsletter on Substack. Or if you're still addicted to social media, find us on Instagram and LinkedIn.
We'd like to thank our rockstar production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams.
Now for the boring part. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you're looking for mental health treatment, please visit the resources page of our website, offtheclockpsych.com.